Venus should be Earth's twin. Same size, same rock, nearly the same distance from the Sun. The planet next door, close enough to see tonight without a telescope, burning white in your evening sky. By every rule we had in the 1950s, it should be the second place in the solar system where life could take hold. Serious scientists pictured warm swamps under those clouds, jungles, a younger, wetter version of our own world waiting for us to arrive. They could not have been more wrong. Venus is a graveyard. Every machine we have ever landed there has died within hours, most within minutes, crushed, cooked, or cut off mid-sentence. And here is the part almost nobody tells you. Nearly everything we know about the surface of Venus, every real photograph of its ground, comes from a small handful of Soviet probes that stopped transmitting more than 40 years ago. Think about what that means. We have mapped our own ocean floor. We have sharp close-ups of Pluto 3 billion miles away. We have flown a helicopter through the sky of Mars. But the last real photos from the ground of our nearest neighbor are 44 years old, older than most of the people watching this. Something turned the world most like ours into the single deadliest place we have ever tried to touch. And the strangest thing about that story isn't what killed those machines. It's that after 1985, we stopped going back at all. This is why. Start with the fact that shattered the jungle dream. Venus is the hottest planet in the entire solar system, not Mercury, the little scorched world that sits twice as close to the sun and takes the full blast of it. Venus wins, and it isn't close. The surface holds steady at around 467 degrees Celsius, 872 Fahrenheit. That is hot enough to melt lead, to melt tin, to melt zinc, the way an ice cube melts on a hot stove. A kitchen oven tops out near 260. Venus runs almost twice that, everywhere, all the time. On Mercury, the night side plunges below freezing. Savage cold the moment the sun goes down. Venus does not do that. Day or night, pole or equator, on the highest mountain or the lowest plain, the temperature barely moves. You could not find a cool spot on the whole planet if your life depended on it. And it would. Stranger still, Venus is the brightest planet in our sky, and it earns that title by being a mirror. Those thick clouds bounce roughly 3/4 of the sunlight that hits them straight back into space. Less than 1/3 of the sun's energy even reaches the ground. By rights, that should make Venus cooler than Earth, not hotter. And yet it is the hottest world we know. So the heat has nothing to do with how close the sun sits, and nothing to do with how much sunlight gets through. It comes from the air itself. Venus is smothering under its own atmosphere. This is a runaway greenhouse, and it is the key to the whole story. About 96% of Venus's air is carbon dioxide, capped by permanent clouds of concentrated sulfuric acid. Sunlight slips in through the top. Heat tries to climb back out, and the thick carbon dioxide slams the door and holds it shut. It is not a blanket draped over the planet. It is a lid clamped on a pressure cooker, and once you picture the lid, you can see the second thing waiting to kill anything that lands. Wait. At the surface, the atmosphere presses down at about 92 times the pressure you feel at sea level right now. That is the weight of the ocean nearly a kilometer deep, enough to fold a steel submarine like a paper cup. The air gets so dense down there it stops behaving like air at all. Near the ground, it flows more like a hot, invisible fluid you would have to swim through. Heat that melts metal, pressure that crushes hulls. And we still haven't reached the part where the planet itself stops making sense, because Venus spins backwards. On almost every planet, the sun rises in the east. On Venus, it rises in the west. The entire world turns the wrong way, and no one is fully sure why. It turns so slowly that one Venusian day drags on for 243 Earth days, while its whole year is only 225. Sit with that for a second. A single day on Venus lasts longer than its entire year. The ground is nearly frozen in place. Now look up, and the planet contradicts itself. While the surface barely creeps, the entire cloud layer tears around Venus in about 4 days, lapping the ground beneath it roughly 60 times faster than the planet rotates. Up near the cloud tops, winds run at around 360 kilometers an hour, faster than a bullet train, in a sky that never once goes still. Scientists call it super rotation, and after 50 years of watching it, they still argue about what drives it. A world where the ground stands still and the air is a permanent hurricane. Even the spin here is broken. And remember, we hadn't landed yet. Put yourself down there for a second, if only to feel the impossibility of it. You would not burn to death because burning takes time. At 467 degrees, you would flash to the temperature of the air almost instantly. The pressure would crush your chest before your body registered the heat. And the sulfuric acid in the sky would be the least of your problems, because you would already be dead 3 different ways at once. This is not a place you visit. This is a place that erases you, which is why for 60 years, we have only ever sent machines. And learning what those machines learned cost us most of them. Everything I told you, we learned the hard way, by hurling spacecraft at Venus and watching them die, one after another. In the 1960s, at the peak of the Cold War, the Soviet Union decided Venus would be their planet, the way America had claimed the moon. The designer driving that program was a man named Georgy Babakhin, and his teams built probe after probe aimed at the clouds. In October 1967, Moscow told the world it had a triumph. Venera 4 had landed on another planet. It had not. Venera 4 never reached the ground. It was engineered to withstand about 25 atmospheres of pressure, a fair guess with the numbers they had. The true surface pressure, we now know, is nearly 4 times that. So the probe was crushed roughly 25 kilometers up, still high in the sky, radioing readings that stopped making sense right up until the air folded it shut. 1 day later, America's Mariner 5 swept past and confirmed the brutal truth, while its predecessor, Mariner 2, had already flown by in 1962 and caught the first hint that Venus ran murderously hot. The Soviets had aimed at a target far more hostile than anyone on Earth had imagined, and nobody yet knew how much deeper the hell went. This was the pattern of the whole program, a public announcement of triumph, and behind it a machine that had already been destroyed. The failures were state secrets. Only the victories got press. One small detail: hold on to it, because it pays off at the very end. For almost every Venus probe, Soviet engineers built a twin, a backup, an identical machine, ready on the ground in case the first one failed at launch. Most of those twins were later scrapped or stripped for parts. One of them was not. One twin would end up stranded, circling a planet it was never meant to orbit, waiting out the decades in silence. For now, remember one thing: there was always a second machine. The dying continued. Venera 5 and 6 plunged in and imploded before they ever touched down, giving up their last data in the crush. So Babakhin's engineers threw out their whole philosophy. They stopped building spacecraft and started building submarines. Venera 7 was a forged titanium sphere, overbuilt to survive pressure that could sink a warship, and chilled down before the descent to buy a few extra minutes against the heat. In 1970, it slammed into the surface at around 60 kilometers an hour, tipped onto its side, and its antenna pointed the wrong way. From what looked like pure static, technicians clawed out a signal. 23 minutes of data. The first words ever sent from the surface of another planet. 23 minutes. It was almost nothing, and it changed everything. Could they do better? 5 years later, Venera 9 answered. This time the sphere carried a camera and a bank of floodlights in case Venus was pitch dark under all that cloud. In October 1975, for the first time in human history, a machine sent back a photograph from the surface of another world. Not a dot on a graph, not a smudge. Sharp, broken rocks running out to a close horizon, and the engineers were stunned to find they barely needed the floodlights at all. Enough sunlight was fighting its way down through 50 kilometers of cloud to light the ground like an overcast afternoon back in Moscow. Nobody had expected the rocks to look so young, so freshly broken, unworn by any wind or age. And nobody expected the number that came stamped on the picture. Venera 9 held on for 53 minutes before the heat killed it. Watch the clock climb. 23 minutes, then 53. Each machine was buying our species a few more minutes of sight before Venus shut its eyes again. And the best run of all was still to come. March 1982. Venera 13. It touched down, punched an arm into the soil, pulled a sample, and began scanning the horizon line by line. And it refused to die. 30 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes, 127 minutes on the surface of Venus. That is the record. It has stood unbroken for 44 years. In that time, the little sphere sent home the first color photographs ever taken from another planet. Orange rock, scattered slabs, under a sky the color of sulfur. And it did one more thing. Almost no machine has managed on that ground. It carried a microphone. For the first time in history, we heard another planet. The low, heavy push of wind dragging air 60 times thicker than ours across bare stone. A slow, dense sound. More felt than heard. The closest thing to a voice a dead world has ever given us. Color. Sound. 127 minutes of a living signal from inside an oven. And then, for reasons that have nothing to do with broken engineering, the pictures stopped. For good. So here is the question that should be bothering you by now. If we could do all of that, land on Hell, take color photos, record the wind, then why did we quit? The last spacecraft to reach the surface of Venus arrived in 1985. Since then, nothing. 41 years without a single new landing on the ground. Which means those old Soviet pictures are not only old, they are all we have. Every image you have ever seen of the surface of Venus was captured more than 4 decades ago by a few titanium spheres that each survived less than the runtime of a movie. We have gigabytes of Mars. We have live weather from Jupiter. And our newest photograph of the ground of Venus is 44 years old and counting. So which is it? Were we afraid of what we might find down there? Or was it, in the end, too hard? Well, start with too hard because that part is painfully real. Ordinary electronics, the silicon inside every phone, every laptop, every normal spacecraft, begin to fail above about 150 degrees Celsius. On Venus at 467, they do not struggle. They cook in seconds. Every extra minute those Soviet landers survived was stolen. The engineers sealed the electronics inside a pressure vessel, packed it in coolant, and started a countdown, racing to send data before the heat leaked in and ended them. There is no rover crawling across Venus because a rover would be dead before it finished a single photo. We have not been completely blind since. In 2020 and 2021, NASA's Parker Solar Probe swung past Venus and, almost by accident, caught a faint reddish glow of the surface leaking up through the clouds in infrared. The first optical images of the ground since the Soviets, taken from a spacecraft that was aimed at the Sun, not at Venus. A glimpse, a workaround. But nobody has gone there on purpose to land in over 40 years. That explains the silence. It does not explain everything. Because the real reason people cannot let Venus go is not the engineering. It is those photographs. In 2012, a scientist did something nobody had bothered to do in 30 years. He went back and looked at the old Venera images again, closely, frame by frame, cleaning up the decades-old data. And then he said a sentence that got him quietly buried by his own field. He said something in the pictures had moved. His name was Leonid Ksanfomality, a senior scientist at Russia's Space Research Institute. Not an anonymous crank online, but one of the people who had helped design the instruments on those very landers. He took the Venera 13 sequence and reprocessed it, and across the frames he flagged shapes that seemed to appear, shift position, and then vanish. One of them, about the size of your hand, he compared to a scorpion. He chose his words with care, but he went there. He wrote that the shapes might let us suggest they were living. Read that again. A man who had spent his entire career on Venus, staring at the only surface photos our species owns, saying out loud that something in them might be alive. It is exactly the kind of claim this channel exists to chase down. So we have to ask it straight. Was it real? No, almost certainly not. And it matters that I say that plainly, because a science channel that sells you a Venusian scorpion is lying to your face. When other researchers examined the same frames, the moving objects fell apart. Some were image noise. The grain of a 1982 scan beamed across 40 million kilometers of space. One of the most famous creatures lined up neatly with the lander's own ejected lens cap, sitting there on the dirt where it fell. The verdict from the wider field was flat. This is human eyes inventing an animal out of static. Pattern hunting, not proof. But here is the turn, and it's the one this whole genre keeps missing. We have spent 44 years arguing about shapes in old pictures of the ground, and the ground was always the wrong place to look. If anything is alive on Venus, it was never going to be sitting in a 467-degree furnace. It would be somewhere we have barely visited, somewhere higher. And the very last thing the Soviets ever did at Venus points straight up at it, 1985. The final Soviet mission to Venus was not a landing at all. Two probes, Venera-1 and Venera-2, dropped a pair of balloons into the clouds, about 54 kilometers up, as they coasted past on their way to chase a comet. For roughly 2 Earth days, those balloons drifted through the acid haze, shoved along by that endless, super-rotating wind, radioing measurements home. Then the mission moved on. The program wound down, and humanity walked away from the one layer of Venus that is not trying to kill you. Because that is the twist, hiding in the geography. Climb up from that lethal surface and Venus cools right down. Somewhere around 50 to 65 kilometers high, inside those clouds, the temperature falls to roughly 0 to 50 degrees Celsius, and the pressure drops to about 1 atmosphere, the same as the air in the room around you right now. Set aside the sulfuric acid for a moment, and it is, by a wide margin, the most Earth-like real estate anywhere off the surface of Earth. NASA engineers have taken that seriously enough to sketch a concept called Shavok, crewed airships floating at around 50 kilometers, where you would not need a pressure suit at all, only air to breathe and armor against the acid. A crewed mission to the clouds of Venus is, on paper, easier than a base on the surface of Mars. And those clouds hold a real mystery, one with nothing to do with wishful thinking. Look at Venus in ultraviolet light, and it is not a smooth white ball. It is streaked with dark markings, because something up there is drinking in ultraviolet sunlight. We have watched those stains for 60 years, and still cannot say for certain what the substance is. Back in the 1960s, Carl Sagan floated the idea that microbes might survive in that temperate cloud layer. He was speculating, and most scientists filed it away. But the dark absorber is real. It is unexplained, and it sits in the one part of Venus where life is not instantly impossible. And in 2020, a team announced they had found something else floating up there. Astronomer Jane Greaves and her colleagues reported phosphine gas in Venus's clouds, a molecule that, here on Earth, is produced almost only by life in places starved of oxygen. The announcement set off a scientific war. Some teams reanalyzed the data and found nothing. Others say the faint signal keeps coming back. Years on, it is still unexplained. Not proof of life. Nowhere close. But a question that stubbornly refuses to close. And it forces a much bigger one. If something is drifting up there, where did it come from? To even guess at that, you have to forget the furnace for a moment and rewind billions of years. Because Venus was not born like this. NASA's own climate models suggest early Venus may have had a shallow ocean of liquid water and mild habitable temperatures for as long as 2 billion years. Picture it. 2 billion years of a temperate world, with water on its surface, sitting in the same young neighborhood as the early Earth. 2 twins starting the same race, and then Venus lost. 2 things doomed it. It sits a little closer to the sun, so as the sun slowly brightened, Venus warmed first, and its oceans began to evaporate. Water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas, so the warming fed on itself faster and faster until the seas boiled into the sky, and Venus had no way to hold on to it. Unlike Earth, it has almost no magnetic field to shield it, so the solar wind has been stripping that escaping water off into space ever since. We can even read the wreckage in the air today. The heavy form of hydrogen left behind is wildly enriched, the chemical fingerprint of an entire ocean that boiled off and blew away. The twin is not a broken copy of Earth. It is a preview of what a warming world can become. Venus is the only place where we can study a runaway greenhouse that already ran to completion. The same basic physics of carbon dioxide trapping heat, pushed all the way to its worst possible ending. In a real sense, every climate model of our own planet is tested against the corpse of our twin. And a planet with oceans for 2 billion years is a planet with time. Time enough, perhaps, for a beginning. This is where the year 2026 makes it stranger than any scorpion. A team from Johns Hopkins and Sandia National Laboratories ran the numbers on a quiet, unsettling idea. For billions of years, large asteroid impacts on Earth have blasted chunks of our surface into space. And some of that debris, carrying microbes, drifts across to Venus. Their estimate lands near 100 living cells reaching Venus's clouds every year. Stretch that across 1 billion years, and it adds up to something like 20 billion cells, mailed from Earth to the sky of Venus, 1 grain of rock at a time, across billions of years. It is speculative, and the authors are the first to say so. Every number in the model carries enormous uncertainty. But look at the shape of the idea. The planet that has destroyed every single machine we ever sent it may already be carrying something of us. Earth life, seeded into an alien sky, drifting there generation after generation, the entire time we weren't looking. We sent our probes to Venus to ask whether we are alone. We may have been quietly mailing ourselves there for 1 billion years. And one of those old machines had proved the trip is survivable in the other direction, too. Remember the twin. In 1972, the Soviets launched another Venus lander, and its rocket cut out early, stranding the probe in orbit around Earth instead of flinging it toward Venus. They filed it under a bland cover name, Cosmos 482, but it was built like all the others. A titanium sphere designed to survive the crushing, burning fall into the thickest atmosphere in the solar system. So it did not quietly burn up. It circled us, silently, for 53 years. Then, on May 10, 2025, it came home. After more than 5 decades in orbit, Cosmos 482 dropped back through our sky and splashed into the Indian Ocean, west of Jakarta. And the eerie part, it may well have reached the surface in one piece, because it was engineered to survive an atmosphere far more violent than our own. A machine built to land on Venus finally completed a landing, half a century late, on the planet that had built it, and at last, we are going back. We never fully abandoned the view from orbit. Japan's Akatsuki spacecraft spent a decade circling Venus, chasing that super-rotating wind after surviving a failed insertion that nearly lost it. But nobody has touched the surface or the clouds in 40 years. That is about to change. NASA's Da Vinci probe will plunge through the atmosphere and taste its chemistry all the way down, hunting for the fingerprints of that lost water, and photographing a strange, cracked highland terrain called Tesseru on the way, ground that some scientists think could be the remains of ancient continents, maybe even old shorelines. 2 orbiters, NASA's Veritas and Europe's Envision, will map the hidden surface in radar detail we have never had, aimed squarely at the questions those old titanium spheres left wide open, and there are so many. We still don't know what dark material is soaking up sunlight inside those clouds. The streaks are right there, and no one can name them. We don't know why the planet turns backwards. We don't know whether that phosphine is real, or what is making it. We don't even know for certain when Venus lost its oceans, or whether anything living was ever there to feel them go. Venus should be Earth's twin, and it is, not the postcard version, but the honest one. The same size, the same rock, the same bright morning start, and a very different ending. A warning wrapped in acid cloud hanging right there in our own sky, still holding the last photographs we ever dared to take of its face, 44 years old, and waiting. We stopped looking because it was hard. We're going back because we are beginning to understand what our twin has been trying to tell us the whole time. For the first time in over 40 years, the questions those old machines died asking, what killed our twin, and whether anything still drifts in its sky, are coming back within reach. The lights are still on next door. We only have to be brave enough to knock. That's as far as this one goes, but the edge always moves. This is Aphelo. Subscribe, drop a like if it earned it, and your next one's on screen now. I'll meet you a little further out.